Evolutionary.org, episode 493. Steve Schmee here, aka Steve Smith, joined by the Mobster. What's up, buddy? How you doing?
This is good. This is one of those super effective performance enhancing drugs, people, that does what it says on the label, and you don't have to use crazy amounts. So yeah, I'm good to go. Let's hit it.
So for today, we're going to be talking about Cardarine GW501516. Now, Cardarine is sold as a SARM. It's sold at SARMS companies, but it's not a SARM. It is actually a drug, and it's a PPAR drug. And it's a drug that binds to the PPAR receptor. So created by GlaxoSmithKline and Ligand Pharmaceuticals in 1992. It was discovered that Cardarine, when binding to the PPAR receptor, recruits what is called coactivator PGC-1A enzyme. Then it increases the expression in genes involved in the expenditure of energy. So it's been used since, I would say, the 2000s. If you were lucky enough to get a hold of it as an athlete in the early to mid 2000s, that's when it really started to take off by the late 2000s. And the Olympians back then were definitely all over it. They were basically using a ton of it in the Olympics and giving themselves an advantage. At the time, it was not banned. Now, of course, it's banned by every major organizations. So it gives you a tremendous athletic advantage over your peers when you are on it. And you can tell when you take it really right off the bat. The first dose you take and you go do your workout, if you really understand what your body is capable of, whether you're doing cardio, whether you're doing weight training or any type of athletic, even having sex, I mean, it's going to make a difference. It's going to give you more wind. It's going to allow you to push harder and longer than you normally would. So, and it also is a great fat burner, but it's not a stimulant, and it doesn't affect your hunger like stimulants do and mess around with that and cause you to get hot and all that. So it really is an amazing drug to use. So basically what happened in 2001, Mobster, there was a publication that came out, phase 1 and phase 2 trials to treat lipid strain. And then phase 2 study showed it was effective for diabetes, obesity, lipid health, and heart disease. And then in 2007, it got discontinued. And then that's when coaches around the time started saying, maybe we should get a hold of this and give it to our athletes. And that's what happened. Now, some of the coaches at that time, they were paying $1,000 a month for a supply of it. That's how it was hard to get a hold of this stuff. So, and they couldn't test for it. There wasn't a way to test for it. So 2008 China Olympics, large percentage of athletes were using it. And then the next year, WADA and IOC began to test for it, and many athletes have been busted ever since. So let's get into get into some stuff, Mobster, and give us your thoughts so far.
One very quick thing, guys. As per always with these kind of situations, when anyone we love, I will say I like it. I think Steve likes it, and even though I've lacked the personal experience of it, Steve, plenty of our members have used it and they all think it's great too. So what happens with this stuff, again, very quickly, other products are tested for at the same time, and there will be this as product X, but product Y was better. The response on product Y was better for the medical reasons it was created for. So it's again one of those situations where lab, pharma company, whatever you want to call them, found something that was almost identical, that treated a medical condition better, and perhaps, as we will get into in terms of the risk factors, they were ever so slightly less for in those specific set of circumstances that they were tested. And they have to test the way that they test. Stuff sometimes takes 10, 15 years to come to market. So it's one of those, from our point of view, when you wonder why they removed it, but the thing that they replaced it with isn't as effective as a performance enhancing drug as Cardarine is. And that's just how that kind of stuff works. But who cares, right, guys? You want to get in shape. You want to have more energy. Cardarine is fantastic for that. Back to you, Steve.
So let's talk about how specifically it works for endurance. So it works by binding to the PPAR agonist receptor, as I mentioned earlier. And what happens is the output of energy changes the activity in the genes, causing a noticeable uptick in endurance. So it'd be like taking a V4 engine out of a car and replacing with a V8 engine. So you're going to be able to rev up your body's engine more and push harder without getting tired as easy. So let's say you're in the gym and you're really busting your ass and you're doing a lot of reps, a lot of sets, and your heart rate goes higher and higher each rep and each set you do. And then in the middle of your rep, in the middle of your set, your heart rate's increasing. Well, when you run Cardarine, it's going to allow you to push just as hard and your heart rate won't go up as much. So it's really messing around with the way your body uses that energy and outputs that energy. So a hypothetical situation for me is when I ran it for I basically was able to take time off my 5K, my 1 mile, my 10K, etc. Half marathon, whether you want a marathon. I've never ran a marathon. I've run half marathons, but not ever a marathon. But you're going to be able to take tons of time off your runs because of the way this stuff changes the way your body uses energy. But it's not going to in turn cause you, it does the opposite of what stimulants do. When you take a stimulant, it increases your heart rate, so you're going to hit your maximum heart rate with less effort on a stimulant. So you're going to get winded quicker when you use a stimulant. Cardarine does the opposite. You're going to be able to push longer and harder without your heart hitting that maximum heart rate. So really it's basically improving the way your heart functions and improving the RPMs. That's why I kind of compare it to a car engine. You're going to be able to rev up your RPMs more just by taking Cardarine when it comes to endurance. Now, when it comes to fat loss, the way it works for fat loss, Mobster, is it increases glucose uptake. So it changes how your body treats nutrients and how we store fat. So it's going to make it harder for your body to store fat. So guys who run Cardarine will notice they can eat a lot crappy foods and still not gain fat on it. But when you eat a good, proper diet, and we know this from the studies and anecdotal evidence, you're going to have tremendous results with burning fat. The fat loss benefits, in my experience, will kick in the second month you're on it, but the endurance benefits right away. Like literally the first time you take Cardarine, you'll notice, if you know your body enough, you'll notice a difference right away.
Now, here's the thing, guys. I was gonna cover all of what Steve said, if you wanted to, in a phrase. And ultimately, it makes that the energy process, the cardio process, the diet process, just simply more efficient. And again, because of the doses that we're going to talk about momentarily, they're not super crazy high. So even if it came with a bunch of horrible side effects, which doesn't really happen in Cardarine, which is why it's so fucking amazing, it has to be said, the low dose, the effective dose, just makes all that good work that you should be doing, that you must be doing in our recommendation, that much more effective, that much more efficient. Again, I've not used Cardarine, hands up straight away, but I've seen recommendation after recommendation after recommendation, and everybody's saying the same thing: that sense of energy, the sense of not being quite as knackered, not being quite as worn out, not, as Steve said, in terms of the heart rate, not being pedal to the metal, not being quite as having to grind through. Cardarine just makes that whole process much more easier. And it just, in my mind, you could probably say, just makes everything that much more efficient. All the other things that you're already doing, that much, working that little tiny bit better. Almost, Steve, to use the engine analogy, like you're adding a little bit of this sort of, I think there's something, we got stuff over here, JetBlue, something that you can add that makes the way that the fuel goes through the engine better. It's kind of working like that. It's making you better at using the energy. It's making you better in terms of your cardio, your conditioning. You don't feel like you're going super crazy, and yet you're looking at, oh, I've shaved 5 seconds off here. I feel like I could go running around the track again. It just seems to have that work. It's not like Ephedrine or any of those other kind of stimulants that Steve says, where you will do some of the same things, but you will feel something coming along with that. You will notice that there are issues. You notice that you're losing. And a good example here is I don't think people complain about losing sleep on Cardarine. So, you know, it's just making you more efficient, full stop, Steve.
Yeah, and it doesn't mess with your sleep at all. So we'll get into the side effects shortly. Half-life is about 24 hours, so taking it once a day is completely fine. Detection time, it's rumored to be about a month, but we don't really know. And there have been a lot of people, Mobster, who have been busted for using Cardarine. There was one bicyclist from Costa Rica. He got a 12-year ban for using it. So if you do, compete at these, types of things where you are tested, don't cheat. I'm sorry, but you're taking a gamble if you use it, because you will get busted for it and you will get banned. And you know what I'm saying? So if you're a normal gym rat, using it, that's fine. You're not going to get tested. But if you're a tested athlete, you're cheating. You are cheating for sure.
Very quickly, guys, I'll jump in here because these questions do come up on the forums. I've seen them and I've answered them, and I know Steve has. We know for a fact that some of you guys, I'm thinking specifically of MMA athletes, but even guys that play tennis or basketball or whatever else, they come on the forum and they say, I want to beat my buddies. I want to do better on the court. I want to do better in the cage. And we understand that. Now, if you're amateur, if you're not tested, as Steve says, that's fine. You just want to play a better game of basketball, go ahead, fill your boots. Cardarine's fantastic. But if you are a tested athlete, here's how this stuff works. There's a mobsterism out there. I've used this multiple times. All of those federations and organizations that test are getting better and better and better. MMA is the finest example I can think of, where guys are having their B samples tested from 2 years ago. And because the test has improved from 2 years ago, they're getting 6-month bans. They're being fined. And that's just in MMA. And as a professional, the bigger name that you make for yourself, the more highly ranked you are, no matter what the sport is, the more likely you are to be tested. It is a given that the first 3 in a big race in the Olympics are tested, especially the winner. But nearly always, I believe it's a given that the first 3 are tested. If you have this in your system, you will get caught. It's as simple as that. Weighted testing and IOC testing, especially if the federation or sport or organization you belongs to uses those principles, uses that standard of testing, you will get caught. So you've been warned. Steve.
Let's talk about the side effects, Mobster. And you're going to kind of get into the elephant in the room in a second, but let me go through. Let me explain. This is a drug. Remember, it's not a hormone. It's not a drug. So it's not going to be suppressive to your HPTA. It's not going to affect your pituitary glands. It's not going to shrink your balls, or it's not going to affect your Leydig cells. The thing is, with Cardarine, we're using PED dosages, guys. Remember that. You're not running the dosages that it was medically, done for. Okay, back in the day, you're running it. That's what we do in bodybuilding. We take the medical dosages and we increase them tremendously. It's just like testosterone. The medical dosage of testosterone replacement therapy is about 90 to 100 milligrams a week. But guys, when they run a cycle, they're running 500 or 1,000 milligrams a week of testosterone. Same thing with Cardarine. We're running 10, 20, 25 times what the benefits would be. So in this case, because it is a drug, it's going to come with side effects. It's going to affect your organs over time. If you abuse it, it's going to affect things in your body. That's just the way it is as a drug. So you never want to run Cardarine too long. You always want to make sure you cycle out. Now, if you run it correctly, the side effects are really not there. And it's amazing that some people report their cholesterol levels improve on it, their heart health improves on it, and stuff like that. So you should not experience side effects if you run it correctly. And we'll kind of get into the dosages and how to run it shortly. But Mobster, we talked about on the pre-show. Why don't you address the elephant in the room with Cardarine?
The elephant in the room that Steve just mentioned. I hate this, right? Because we see it come up again and again. So I'm going to do my angry mobster voice, right? Guys, so here's how this shit works. I will see some of you saying, oh, but I've heard Cardarine causes cancer. It doesn't cause cancer. Here's how this stuff works. Every single study out there has to do in a Petri dish, then animal testing, then human testing. So what happened with GW, right? They basically tested to see what was the worst dose that you could take with, in this case, mice. So they started them off at a really low dose, the stuff that you'd be using as a human being. And don't forget, they're allowing for the weight of their mouse versus the weight of a human being. And they kept going and going and going until they were using, I believe in the original study, Steve, the equivalent of 200 times but in other studies, up to 1,000 times the effective dose. Now, don't forget, guys, the effective dose was for medical reasons. So I've run the numbers on this when it came up on the forums before, Steve. And I worked out that you'd have to be taken as a human being 1 kilogram, 1,000 grams, or I believe what's that? Isn't that 100,000 milligrams or 1,000 milligrams? Something absolutely ridiculous. Literally, but just a kilogram per day as a human being to have any of the potential side effects. And this is how fucked up this shit was. So people go, oh, Cardarine causes cancer. Again, let's take those mice. So not only have they got them on a minimum of 200 times the effective dose for a human being, it wasn't all the mice. It was something like 10% of the mice. Now, Steve and I have been around this game a very long time, and anybody else listening, you can go off and look this stuff up. When was it first used? How many places sell it? How many people on forums use it? I have yet to see one single example of anybody, never mind medically, but specifically for athletic enhancement, for performance enhancement, as a diet aid, getting into shape. I've yet to see one single, not in the media, not newspapers, not online, nowhere. Even when it said it causes cancer, they have yet to provide one single example of a human being that got cancer as a result of using Cardarine. Not one, Steve. So it's kind of really, really annoying. And it's what's really annoying when it comes to this stuff again is that people talk about doing research. They mean Google. So they've gone to Google or a search engine and they've typed in Cardarine side effects, and it's almost kind of like, it's going to be that first choice that it might cause cancer. And but then you actually go and read the article, you actually go and do the research. If you get lucky and the article includes links to studies, includes link to scientific articles that they've referenced for the article, you'll then see exactly what I just said, that it was only when they pushed the doses to toxic levels in mice, the equivalent of a kilogram in a human being, which is absolutely obscene. The article that we're using to reference here today, Steve, you quite properly say that if you took the equivalent crazy dosages that they did in these studies just to push the levels to where they might become toxic in a human being using mice, it would be the equivalent of taking 1,000 aspirin. And as you say in the article, Steve, 50 times a dose of the sensible dose of aspirin would fuck you up. Literally, that's how this it's kind of annoying, Steve, and it's frustrating because there's no need for any of this. We're not mice. We're not going to use 200 times the effective dose. I will say, when we get to the dosage in a moment, I have seen people that come onto the forum that are out of shape, and they'll say something like, I was thinking of trying 100 milligrams. Don't. The dose that seems to work is the dose that seems to work for. I said 99.9%, and another podcast we've done, Steve, I would say 100%. Men, women, you don't need to use anything other than the dose that we're going to suggest. There's no need to double, triple, quadruple, whatever. There's absolutely no need to go that stuff, because the dose that we talk about works for everybody. And that's what has everybody raving about it. And that's why it proves it effective. And again, I will reiterate, when it comes to side effects, when it comes to that scare, that elephant in the room, the argument was that it caused cancer. Show me an example. You need to be able to prove to me and to the listeners and to any of the people that you're going to meet on the forums, you can find an example with one person, just one, that said they got cancer, and it was shown that they got cancer when they went to hospital and they got tested and they got checked out, and their bloods and whatever come back specifically because they used Cardarine. There has not been one today, not one single one, Steve. Back to you.
So Cardarine, as Mobster said, he alluded to it. You're not going to take Cardarine if you've never run a 5K before. You're not going to magically take Cardarine and then the next day go and run a 20-minute 5K. That's not how this stuff works, okay? The way Cardarine is going to benefit you, especially those of you listening who are legitimate athletes. You're not listening to this podcast unless you've been in the grind a long time. Let's say you run a 20-minute 5K. Every time you run a 5K, you're 20 minutes and 20 seconds, 20 minutes and 30 seconds. You can't quite crack the 20-minute plateau. Then you start using Cardarine. Then the next 5K you run while you're on Cardarine, you're going to break that 20 minutes. You're going to go down to like 1930, 1935. It's going to be like,
Yes.
wow, I finally broke my all-time personal record thanks to Cardarine. That's what Cardarine is all about. So the more you put into it, the more Cardarine is going to benefit you. And we know that not just from the studies, but also from the anecdotal data. Same thing with diet. The more you put into it, the better. If you're fasting, if you're eating good quality foods, if you're staying away from restaurant and fast food and all this crap, you're going to get the most benefits out of Cardarine when it comes to your endurance and your fat loss. So that's where Cardarine really pays off. So typical dosage for both men and women, 10 to 20 milligrams a day. 20 milligrams is the sweet spot. I've never used more than that. I haven't had to use more than that because it does the job at 20 milligrams. So
I've never seen, Steve, sorry, just to jump in here. I've never seen any, and it goes like the cancer thing I just talked about. I've never seen one single example of someone being able to prove that they needed to have more than 20 milligrams and it worked better for them. I've not seen one, not one. I've been with the Evolutionary family now for 4 years. I've been doing this thing a very, very long time. And even when Cardarine came out, I'd probably about 2/3 of my, right now, the time that I've been involved in the IGO, 2/3 of my way through that experience when Cardarine came on the scene. And I have not seen one single example of anybody being able to prove to me or anybody else of needing to take more than 20 milligrams. Guys, we see this all the time where I've taken 300 milligrams of some form of test and you can double up and you won't get double the gains. You'll get maybe a 30 or 40% increase. And even then there's a point beyond which it won't happen. You could take grams and grams and grams and you're just not going to gain kilos and pounds and more muscle. It just doesn't work like that. You might require more to gain a smaller gain. But with Cardarine, that doesn't seem to be the case. That literally 10 to 20 milligrams, and I'm thinking that's probably the difference between male and female. Female, the 10, and even then they can take 20 milligrams. And men, it just seems to work for everybody. That is the sweet spot. Says it's an optimal, ideal amount. Doubling up to 40, doubling up again to 80 and whatever, doesn't produce anything that I've seen. Not even one person, Steve, said, "Oh, I've got 10% better gains, 15% better gains." Nothing, not one time. 20 milligrams is all you need. It really, really is all you absolutely. I'm trying to think of one other drug, Steve, not one, where we would see a doctor if it was being prescribed to you, where they would vary the dosage, or if you were using a performance enhancing drug, there was a small increase in a gain, small increase in fat loss or whatever else. The Cardarine just seems to be the one drug where 20 milligrams is it. It really is it. And that makes it fantastically effective, fantastically cheap, because it's not that expensive to buy. And it's so easy. One of those is a half-life of 24 hours. So one pill a day, one. That's it. Whether you're taking in pill form or liquid form or whatever, one dose, one time a day, 20 milligrams, job done. That makes it probably the simplest performance enhancing drug that we could talk about, Steve, to take. There's no need to.
Yeah, I was going to say, so here's the thing with Cardarine, because it's not a hormone, you can run it, you can run it structurally. You can run it for 12 weeks or up to 16 weeks max. And then you're going to have to come off for 4 weeks or 8 weeks. And then before you go back on, you can run it structurally like that, or you can run it in spurts. I've been known to just run it in spurts. Like if I'm going to do like a lot of cardio, I'll run it leading up to my cardio day. Like if it's Saturday, I'm going to go do a 5K, or I'm going to do a 1 mile sprint, or if I'm going to do a really hard, hot yoga session or a pyro Pilates or something where I know that I need help when it comes to my endurance, I'll run it a few days leading up to it, and I'll run it that morning of. And then it's going to give me a boost going into that workout, right? If you're going to run it for fat loss, run it the structural way. Don't run it that way. But if you're going to run it purely for endurance, you can run it that way and still get the benefits. Because remember, it's not a hormone that needs to build up in your system over time and peak like a normal hormone does. It's a drug. So you can use it as needed, or you can just run it structurally for 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks straight on a daily basis. So Mobster touched on that a bit, and then touched on it being faked. And some of these SARMS companies out there that are spiking with DMP and Clen, and that's where GW sometimes has a reputation of doing things that it's not supposed to do. Talk about those two things.
Well, sorry, remind me the first thing, Steve, because I've got something else I'd like to touch as well. What was the first thing?
Well, I was just going to say, touch on whatever you were going to say, and then touch on it being
Oh,
spiked
All right.
and being
So,
faked.
guys, yeah. So here's the thing, guys, and it's one of those myths, right? So there's this idea sometimes with certain dietary drugs, especially the ones that are going to help you lose weight and or gain energy, that you can, and I've talked about this with regards to SIMS, Steve, where a good example would be DMP, that you can literally sit there and burn fat. I mean, DMP comes with so many side effects. It's so horrible that you can sit on the sofa and a sweat will pour off of you and your metabolism's going through the wall. But then again, of course, because it comes with those horrible side effects, it's just crazy. And then the bounce back afterwards is worse. So you end up in a worse state and a worse fat level than you had before. And that's just because it's so horrible but so effective. So there's a question that occasionally comes up with GW Cardarine where they say you can sit on a sofa and do nothing, no exercise. No, it's not a magic pill. It's not a magic bean. If that was the case, then there would be the pharmaceutical companies would have posters 80 feet high and 200 feet wide on the side of your highways in the States and the motorways over here in the UK, selling this product like it was going out of fashion. They would be banging that drum so loud and so proud. You could literally sit on the sofa and go, no. You have to do the work. It makes you better at doing the work, but it doesn't make you get into shape or have more energy or become fitter or feel like you've become fitter or shave time off your half marathons, your 10K and your 5Ks, sitting on your ass on the sofa eating chips. It doesn't do that. You still got to do the work. It just makes you better at doing the work. Now, the other elephant in the room, Steve, is I'm not going to name the company, Steve, because I don't want 1 million of his supporters come banging on Mobster's door. But we both know who we're thinking of. And he's not the only person with whose company we could talk about. But here's what happened, guys. SARMS specifically, and Cardarine included. We know it's not a SARM, but it's there on that list. The company in question has produced SARMS. There's a kind of clue in the name of the company, and they aren't what they say on the label. Now, even if they've included Cardarine as one of the ingredients, they put other stuff in there. And so what happens is you've had guys that have taken what they thought was a SARM, and it's had a pro-hormone in there. Now, pro-hormones a few years ago were legal, and then they become illegal. To include them in a product like Cardarine with other SARMs, you're going to end up with issues because the customers are taking something that is tainted, it's faked, it's been spiked, as Steve said. So you're going to have pro-hormone issues, which might include, it might include water retention, it might include increased blood pressure issues, and it shouldn't do. You're doing your research by listening to this show. You're going to do your research by looking at the links that we'll provide. You're going to go away and look at the threads that we're going to link to. And you're going to say, right, so those guys that use legitimate GW didn't have any of the side effects that I think I'm having. And this is the company that I use. I'm not going to name them, Steve, but I'm thinking of specifically on one of our other forums, the amount of times someone says, oh, I'm using this product from this company, and it's nearly always the same company name. And nearly every single time, the side effects they're getting are pro-hormone side effects. I can't think of one single occasion, not one, where it's been specifically Cardarine and they've had side effect issues. And for many of the other companies, we've got approved sources. They're approved because we've tested their product, because our members have tried their product, because us moderators and podcast ease have used their product and we like what they do. That's the reason why they're approved. There's no need to fuck around with GW. There absolutely isn't. It is so good. We don't need to spike. In fact, it's kind of annoying, Steve, that this company or any of those companies indeed feel the need to spike it, to fuck around with it. I can't understand the mentality of them. I really can't. It's cheap, it's effective, it does what it says on the label. You don't need to do crazy dosages. So why do you need to spike it? Why do you need to add something to the thing? It doesn't make any sense to me. Can you get your head around why they'd even think about doing this, Steve?
Well, what we've seen is them using, like you said, prohormones, clenbuterol,
Yeah.
or caffeine, and they'll put that in a pill and then sell it as Cardarine. And what happens is people feel a difference on it. They'll get fat loss from those three ingredients in a lot of
Yes.
cases, and they'll feel a difference in the gym, but it's not good. It's not giving you what Cardarine does. And it's dangerous because if you overdose on prohormones, clen, or caffeine, you'll have a lot of side effects. You could even get a
Yes.
stroke. So
Yeah.
that's not right what they're doing, and that is illegal, and they're going to get caught eventually, but a lot of times they don't get caught. So you want to make sure you come on our forums, and we'll lead you to the sources that sell the legit Cardarine.
Yes.
So you can get the real Cardarine, not fake Cardarine. And they do it because it's cheap. Those ingredients are cheap. It's cheaper to put those ingredients in a pill. Probably costs you $1 or $2 to put those ingredients in a pill, rather than really sourcing real Cardarine and selling it. So, Mobster, finish with your final thoughts. Yeah, take us to the disclaimer.
Two things that occur to me with this stuff. I mean, I've discussed this again on the forums, guys. So check it out. Clen works, and it works for a lot of people, but it comes with a bunch of nasty side effects, which lots of people, and I've seen this myself personally, my local gym, girls that have come in, they're a little bit out of shape, want to get in shape for a wedding, want to get in shape, they're going to be a bridesmaid, they want to get in shape because they're going on holiday, they want to look good on the beach, and they've tried Clen. And it's essentially what's happened is that because of the side effects, the shaking, the jitters, the sort of ever so slightly, and I mean ever so slightly out of control sensation, they haven't done the diet, they haven't done the cardio, and then just a jittery, horrible, felt like I've drunk a whole bottle of, used a whole jar of coffee, made me feel, I didn't like it. And so they didn't stay on it, and they didn't get the results that they wanted. So here's the other thing. Sometimes, and this applies to pre-workout products, certain pre-workouts will include ingredients that give you, and I'll use this term loosely, a feel, right? So most pre-workouts contain caffeine, and caffeine is a very effective aerogenic aid. But people like to feel like they're getting something. They want a quote unquote drug-like sense or feeling when they're taking a pre-workout. So some stims include stuff that dilates the blood vessels, so you get a flush to your skin. Made a mild called paresthesia, a mild tingling sensation. You get it from gamma-aminobutyric acid, for example. And this is a very small amount added to a pre-workout. Oh, I can feel this stuff working, Steve. It feels amazing. Cardarine doesn't need that. It does not need that. You don't get a sensation of sitting there on the sofa, like we said earlier on, where you're suddenly full of energy, or jittery, or nervous, or especially, and this applies to some of our listeners with issues with anxiety. Who the hell wants something that makes them feel like anxious when you've already got that as a pre-existing problem? So you don't need to, and you shouldn't need to add to any of these things to make it feel like it's working. You shouldn't need to have that sensation of something happening. You should just, as Steve said earlier on, see that your times have come down, feel that you could have done another few sets in the gym. And again, a perfectly stable, easy to use. I'm going to go as far as to say pretty much safe until I hear otherwise, dose of 20 milligrams from an approved supplier, like the ones we will recommend on the forums. There really is no need to fuck around. Keep it simple, keeping it sweet. And I detest these companies that spike this, Steve. That's why none of those companies will ever be used as an approved source on Evolutionary. Let me tell you that now. If it's famous last words, you have to have me taken out and have me shot. Guys, as always, you still need to put the work in. You still need to train. You still need to do the runs. You still need to do the diet if that's your thing. That's the way you'll get the benefits. It's making you more efficient. Highly recommended and rated product. I'm tempted to try it right now, Steve. That's how much I think it's the bee's knees. If only I didn't slow the fuck down in the gym as a lifter, I could see me if I was a bodybuilder using something like this. And as Steve said, not all the time. That's just simply because you don't need to be flat out or going faster or knocking seconds off your times all the time on all year. So for athletic performance, the idea of bringing this in when I want to drop my time, when a competition's coming up, when I want to get in shape, that works perfectly for me. It's not the sort of drug where it's going to give you long-term problems or whatever else in that particular regards, but what you don't need to run it all year round just because you're not going to get that much more efficient. You're not going to keep knocking 10 seconds off every does. It doesn't work like that. So keep that in mind. As always, please note, we are not doctors and the opinions on these shows are ours and ours alone. It's our view and it's based on our experience and views on the topic. The podcasts are for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and First Amendment applies.